Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever had one of those days where you spill your coffee, miss your train, get ghosted by your crush, and remember that time in 6th grade when you called your teacher Mom? Yeah. Now imagine that. But the universe gives you a magical library where every book is a different version of your life, like Spotify Wrapped, but for your worst decisions. This book is called The Midnight Library, written by Matt Haig, or as I call him, the CEO of Emotional Whiplash. It's like Sliding Doors meets Black Mirror, hosted by your high school librarian who low-key knew everything about your trauma. Our main character, Nora Seed. Life's been dragging her like a Windows 98 update, slow, sad, and full of regret pop-ups. But right when she checks out of life, literally, she checks into a library that lets her try on every what-if like it's emotional cosplay. Like, what if I became a rock star? What if I married that guy with the man bun? What if I didn't quit swimming before the Olympics? So buckle up, folks. We're about to deep dive into quantum regret, sliding realities, and the ultimate millennial fantasy, undoing your own mess with no consequences. Let's open the first book, or at least pretend we read it while making fun of it. Part 1, The Regret Files Open. All right, Nora Seed, 35, depressed, unemployed, cat just died. So yeah, if you're hoping for a fun beach read, surprise! This one starts with the emotional equivalent of stepping on a Lego, barefoot, during an existential crisis. Nora lives in Bedford, and no, that's not a metaphor for emotional purgatory. It's just a very rainy English town where your dreams go to nap. She used to be a promising swimmer, Olympic level, but she quit. She used to be in a band. She quit. She was engaged. Quit. Honestly, if quitting were a sport, she'd have gold. Then everything collapses in a single day. Her cat Voltaire, named after a philosopher because symbolism, dies. Her neighbor, who depends on her for piano lessons, is disappointed. Her boss at the music store fires her. Her estranged brother ignores her message. Her ex-fiancé is happily married and invites her to coffee, which is basically the emotional equivalent of being hit by a bicycle made of regret. So what does Nora do? She decides life isn't worth it anymore. She writes a short note, swallows a bunch of pills at midnight, and expects nothing. But instead of dying, she wakes up in a library. Not a hospital, not heaven, not the DMV, though spiritually similar. A magical library floating between life and death. And guess who's there? Her old school librarian, Mrs. Elm. Because when your mind builds a cosmic transition space, it picks the one adult who didn't totally suck. Mrs. Elm explains, "This place, the Midnight Library, is filled with books. Each one represents a version of Nora's life where she made a different choice. Didn't quit swimming? That's a book. Married her ex? Another book. Became a glaciologist? Yup, even that's in there. Every regret, every what if, it's all here, shelved alphabetically under yikes." Mrs. Elm tells her, "Between life and death, there is a library, and within that library, the shelves go on forever. Every book provides a chance to try another life you could have lived. It's like cosmic Amazon Prime for alternate selves. But here's the kicker. If Nora finds a life where she truly feels happy, fulfilled, complete, she can stay in that life forever. But the moment disappointment creeps in, poof, she's yanked back to the library like a bad Tinder date. And that's where it begins." Part 2, Nora the Olympic swimmer. All right, so Nora's first official dive into her multiverse resume. She picks the one regret that's been shadowboxing her soul since puberty. What if I never quit swimming? Because, fun fact, Nora used to be a swim prodigy. Her dad was all in on the Olympic dream. Morning laps, competitions, soggy towels everywhere, the works. But one day, teenage Nora said nope and walked away. Cue years of guilt and parental disappointment deep-fried in shame. So she grabs the swimming Nora, book off the shelf. Whoosh! She's now in a body that's somehow both hers and not hers, mid-interview on Australian TV, with gold medals and Instagram followers and abs that probably have a six-pack of their own. Turns out in this life, she didn't quit. She trained, she competed, she won Olympic medals, endorsements, fame, the full Michael Phelps starter pack. But here's the twist. She's still not happy. Why? Because her dad, the one who pushed her the hardest, died young. In this reality, they weren't even close by the end. Their relationship was basically a cold pool, looks clean but no warmth, and swimming, once her escape, now feels like punishment. She's exhausted. Every day is another lap in a life she doesn't love. She realizes she didn't quit swimming because she was weak. She quit because it wasn't her dream. It was his. So what does Nora do? She yeets herself right back into the midnight library faster than you can say chlorine damage. Mrs. Elm, sitting there like the universe's chillest therapist, says that one didn't work either, huh? And Nora's like, nope, next. And here's the brutal honesty of this book. It's not about becoming rich, famous, or jacked. It's about asking, did that choice make me feel alive? Spoiler. If you're dead inside with a medal around your neck, you're still dead inside. So now Nora's flipping through regrets like she's speed dating her alternate selves. Each book is a chance. Each life is a maybe. And guess what? We're just getting started. Part 3. Rockstar Nora and the band that didn't break up. Okay, so after bailing on the Olympic life faster than a New Year's resolution, Nora decides to try on another what if that's been haunting her like Spotify recommendations you swear you never clicked. Regret number 42. What if I'd stayed in the band? Yup. Nora was once in a band called The Labyrinths, emo name alert, with her brother Joe and their friend Ravi. They were good, like almost made it big good. But Nora quit before the band blew up. And after that, everything kind of fizzled, friendship, music, and most painfully, her relationship with Joe. So into the rock star life we go. Poof! Suddenly, she's Nora the indie queen. Black eyeliner, stadium tours, maybe a documentary narrated by Tilda Swinton. She's playing shows in Sao Paulo, drinking kombucha with fans, dating some random dude named Dylan who smells like leather jackets and unresolved trauma. Sounds awesome, right? Wrong. Because the tour is exhausting. The fame feels fake. And the chemistry with Dylan? Let's just say even her alternate self was like, ew. But worst of all, her brother Joe. He's alive in this life, but something's off. They're distant, awkward, like two bandmates forced to share a dressing room after a mess-up with their dreams. Turns out, fame didn't fix anything. Joe and Nora never had that talk, the one where they unpack years of silence, grief, and who quit on who first energy. So she does what she does best in this library of infinite lives. She bounces. Back to the dusty shelves, back to Mrs. Elm, who's now basically the chillest bouncer in the Afterlife Club. Mrs. Elm says, rockstar life didn't do it either. And Nora's like, yeah, I peaked somewhere between soundcheck and spiritual emptiness. Here's the truth bomb the book keeps dropping on her and us. You can be famous, rich, beautiful, and still feel like a haunted potato. Because fulfillment doesn't come from external wins. It comes from not ghosting your own heart. So what's next? Nora opens another book. Maybe something quieter. Something less dramatic. LOL. Just kidding. This is Matt Haig. We're going full Black Mirror next. Part 4. Nora the Arctic Glaciologist. Alright, so after Nora dips out of her rockstar timeline like it was a bad Tinder date, she decides to try something wildly different. This time she opens the What If I Had Gone with Izzy to Study Glaciers in Iceland book. Yeah, that's a real thing. Because apparently at one point in her life, Nora had this super energetic friend named Izzy, who was like, let's study ice together in the Arctic. And Nora, being Nora, bailed. Classic. So now welcome to Arctic Nora. She's in Svalbard, a frozen nowhere with more polar bears than people, living in a tiny research base, bundled in parkas, measuring melting glaciers, and dealing with the global warming version of a slow-burn horror movie. And guess what? Izzy's not there. Turns out, in this version of life, Izzy died in a car crash before the trip even happened. Yeah. Just when you thought it was safe to enjoy a nice cold adventure. Emotional iceberg ahead. So Nora's out there, hugging icebergs and pretending everything's fine when a literal polar bear shows up. No, I'm not joking. She gets attacked by a polar bear. I swear Matt Haig woke up and chose Discovery Channel. She barely escapes with her life. Adrenaline, snow, and near death with claws. It's like the universe was like, not emotionally cold enough? Let's add a bear. And what does she do? Same thing she always does. Bail out. Back to the library. Back to Mrs. Elm. Back to what did we learn this time? And here's what we and Nora are starting to get. You can run halfway across the planet, you can change your job, your climate, your boots, but you can't outrun your grief, especially when it wears a parka and speaks fluent regret. Mrs. Elm, sipping eternal tea or whatever timeless beings do, says, Svalbard was a bit nippy, huh? And Nora's like, yeah, emotionally and literally, also polar bear. At this point, she's not even chasing happiness, she's just looking for a life that doesn't try to kill her. So what's next, maybe? A normal life? One where she just marries the guy she once loved? Part 5. Nora the Married Woman. So, after barely surviving a literal polar bear and an emotional one named regret, Nora decides to open a life that seems calm, familiar, cozy. The What If I Had Married Dan book. Now let's talk about Dan. Dan was her ex-fiancé, the kind of guy who wanted to open a country pub and live a quiet, Instagram-free life serving ale and passive-aggressive soup. In Nora's root life, she called off the wedding 2 days before it happened. So yeah, awkward group chat vibes. But what if she hadn't? What if she'd said, I do, and moved to the country with him? She picks the book. Poof! Welcome to Mrs. Nora Ash, wife of pub owner Dan, living in a small English village with quirky neighbours and probably a lot of mason jars. At first, it's cute. They live above a cosy pub called the Three Horseshoes, which sounds charming until you realise it's a metaphor for the three-legged stability of their marriage. The wallpaper's peeling, the vibes are weird, and Dan is not it. He drinks too much. He complains. He cheats, emotionally or physically. We don't even care, because his vibe is gaslight, gatekeep, midlife crisis. Nora's like, I left my quantum library for this. Turns out the life she ran away from, the wedding she cancelled, was one of her best decisions. Because marrying someone to avoid loneliness is like buying a blender to fix your marriage. Loud, confusing, and someone always ends up bleeding. So naturally, she yeets back to the midnight library again. And by this point, even Mrs. Elm is like, you want to just sit and do a crossword for a bit, or... But here's what's changing. Nora's no longer just checking off regrets like a grocery list. She's learning from them. Each life teaches her something about her choices, her needs, the difference between pleasing others and listening to herself. This life taught her that settling isn't safe. It's just a slower version of drowning. And maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't that she made bad choices. Maybe the problem was that she thought every choice was a bad one. Now she's ready to get weirder, to try lives that have nothing to do with regret, but everything to do with possibility. Part 6, The Philosopher's Life. All right, so after surviving a depressing pub marriage, honestly more terrifying than the polar bear, Nora finally cracks open a book that's different. This one? She's a philosophy professor. That's right. Welcome to Dr. Nora, throwing Kant quotes like confetti and possibly owning multiple turtlenecks. Now, the root of this life goes way back. When she was in school, her teacher once told her she'd make a great philosopher. But as with most positive feedback in Nora's life, she shoved that compliment in a drawer marked, "Not for me." Well, guess what? In this timeline, she took that path. And now, she's giving lectures on meaning, existence, and free will, writing books with titles like Perpetual Possibility, A Philosophy of Regret, which sounds like a Netflix series no one finishes. She's got a nice apartment in Paris, a loyal following, and finally, a sense of control. But there's a catch, because there's always a catch. She meets a guy at a book event. He's handsome, smart, and a fan of her work, which sounds great until she realizes he reminds her of herself. Intellectual, thoughtful, but also emotionally cautious, detached, floating above life instead of in it. And suddenly, she sees her current life for what it is. Impressive, sure, but still a performance, a way to keep life at arm's length by turning it into theory. You know that one person in your life who can quote Nietzsche but can't say "I'm sad" without deflecting with a meme? That's this Nora. Even her deep life feels shallow once she's in it. So yeah, you guessed it. Back to the library. Again. At this point, even the bookshelves are probably like, girl, just pick something and go. But Mrs. Elm, still patient, still calm, still dropping wisdom like Yoda in a cardigan. She tells Nora, maybe it's not about finding one perfect life. Maybe it's about understanding the life you already had. And Nora's like, wait, am I the problem? Am I the drama? Because here's the thing. None of these lives are bad, but Nora keeps jumping because thinks she deserves them. She keeps chasing happiness like it's hiding behind the next bookshelf. So now she starts to ask a different question. Not which life is best, but who am I when no one's watching? Yeah, this book's getting real. Part 7, The Life She Never Knew She Needed. All right, buckle up. This is the part where everything clicks, like when you finally understand IKEA instructions after building your bookshelf upside down. So Nora's tried everything. Olympic swimmer, nope. Rock star, pass. Glaciologist, cold and sad. Pub wife, Dan was a human beer coaster. Philosopher, great mind, empty soul. And now she opens a book that feels different. It's not about fixing regret anymore. It's about following curiosity. So what's this life? It's Nora, living in a quiet town, working at an animal shelter. That's it. No fame, no medals, no Paris lectures, no country pub drama, just kindness. She wakes up early, feeds dogs, helps people adopt cats, chats with co-workers who don't suck, and lives in a small, cozy house with warm lighting and a neighbor who brings her actual soup, not metaphorical disappointment. And guess what? She likes it. No existential breakdown, no something's missing panic. It's not perfect, but for once, she belongs. She doesn't feel like she's faking her way through it. She even meets a nice man, Ash, the guy who in her real life was just the friendly neighbor with a crush she never gave a shot. Here, they connect. Naturally. No drama, no power chords. And slowly, painfully, Nora realizes something. She never needed to undo her life. She just needed to understand it, to stop measuring it against what could have been, and start seeing what is. But just as she's warming up to the idea of staying, the Midnight Library starts falling apart. Literally. The books catch fire. The shelves collapse. It's like Inception meets a library clearance sale. Mrs. Elm appears, but now she's glitching like a nostalgic memory with dial-up. Why? Because Nora's body in the root life is dying, and if she doesn't choose to live, for real, she'll lose everything. So she does it. She makes the scariest, bravest, least tick-tock-able decision of all. She chooses to live her real life. No filters, no retakes, just now. And boom, she wakes up, back in her own bed. Hospitals didn't find her in time, but somehow she survived, and from there, she starts over, goes to the neighbor, says hi, applies for a job at the shelter, reconnects with her brother, apologizes to an old friend. Little things, because sometimes life isn't about being extraordinary, it's about being here and making tea. And petting cats and showing up, mic drop. So what have we learned? Well, apparently the afterlife is just one massive Barnes & Noble of regret, managed by your emotionally intelligent librarian from 1997. Also, every version of your life comes with its own flavor of disappointment. Olympian, exhausted. Rock star, lonely. Philosopher, disconnected. Pub wife, trapped. Glaciologist, frozen and attacked by a polar bear. No matter how many lives Nora tried, she couldn't escape the one universal truth. You take yourself with you. Turns out healing isn't about going back and changing the past. It's about forgiving yourself for the past and choosing the present. Yes, even if that present includes reheated soup, job rejections, and cats named existential philosophers. And look, you don't need a magical library to reflect on your life. You just need a little courage, a good friend, and maybe a second cup of tea. Would I recommend the Midnight Library? Absolutely. It's like a TED Talk with plot twists, wrapped in a big cozy blanket of please don't give up. And if you ever find yourself stuck between lives, between choices, or between episodes of emotional clarity, just remember what Nora learned. The book is still being written, and you're holding the pen. Don't forget to subscribe! If you like this deep dive into quantum sadness, philosophical cats, and romanticized librarians, hit that subscribe button like it's a giant lever that opens a new timeline. Next week on Timmy's Stand-Up Book Club, maybe we tackle a dystopia or a romance or a cookbook that accidentally became a horror story. Who knows? Drop your suggestions in the comments. Until then, stay alive, stay weird, and please stop comparing your life to the one in your head. They're both fictional anyway. The end.